started. She has to
I
start.
know. I have to get positioned first.
Okay.
All right.
You have to start recording. On
I know. I was giving it a second. Dad said to give it a second.
For the video.
Now he'll see that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Unbreakable podcast, where we are clearly not Brian and Leslie Fatheree. We are, in fact, 4 out of the 5 children sitting with you here today.
I'm Hannah. I'm the oldest. I take charge of most things in this family. And so, hi, how are you? Today we are going to talk about the topic of purity and good godly relationships. I don't know what we're going to call it. But why don't the rest of you go ahead and introduce yourselves so that everybody knows.
Okay. I am Megan. I am the second child, and that's, I'm the writer of the family, if they ever talk about the writer.
I'm sorry. My sister doesn't like to talk about herself. I'm Scott. I'm the middle child of the family. I am very employed, very busy. I like to read and do a bunch of different things and talk about movies and stuff. And I generally am the humorist of the family. Also, my sister is underselling herself. She is a very good author. She writes all the time, and we're very proud of her.
Yes, we are. Thank you.
I'm Abby. I'm the baby of the family. I am a self-taught artist. I like to do fun things. I don't know.
We are very good at describing ourselves.
Okay, so that's all of us. And welcome to all of you who are listening.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about godly relationships and purity today. So I will say that I distinctly remember when I was 10 years old, my mother put it on. We were homeschooled, in case Mom and Dad haven't mentioned that yet. She put it on my calendar that I had a meeting with her that day, and that scared me because I am the person who perpetually, when someone says I need to meet with you, is like, I am in trouble.
Yep.
Yeah,
I don't know what I did.
Absolutely.
I will rack my brain, but I am in trouble. But I wasn't in trouble. She just wanted to talk with me about puberty and growing up, and so that was fine. I didn't get in trouble. It was kind of nice. But I do distinctly remember that. And that was just kind of how I think Mom and Dad always have approached that, was just very conversational.
Yeah.
And from, an early age.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was 10 too. And
Yeah.
whenever Mom was like, sat me down and was like, okay, this is what's going to happen. I was just like, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 10 or 11 was the general age that they talked with us about that kind of stuff.
I vaguely remember Dad talked to me about puberty and what I was going to start going through, and I was very awkward at that age, and very much so did not know or understand or care about anything that was said, so I just kind of nodded along, and I don't remember very much of it.
Megan and I both, however, distinctly remember when Dad talked to Scott, because at the time we were in a house that had these big glass doors to the library room.
No.
And I feel like Scott's hearing this for the first time.
I am.
And we knew that was what was going on, because we were old enough to have figured it out. We were like, we've had this talk. That's what Dad's doing. And so Mom told us to leave them alone. But the kitchen was on the, you had to walk past to get to the kitchen. And so we kept walking from the living room to the kitchen.
Oh, we found excuses.
So that we could watch. And I just remember Scott's face being redder and redder and redder throughout the conversation.
That sounds about right.
So that's a fun memory
Yes.
for us.
So,
Great.
That's that.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that Mom and Dad also did was they gave us a ring. All of us got purity rings.
Yep.
Abby, why don't you tell us what a purity ring is? And let's define our terms a little.
Okay. Sure.
What is that? What does it mean that
So a purity ring is it's a ring that your parents give you to remind you to stay pure and to wait for the person that God has prepared for you. Mm-hmm. So it's just a reminder that stays on your ring finger until you get married. And then that is replaced by your wedding ring, or your engagement ring, I guess. Did you do engagement ring?
Engagement ring, yeah.
And then wedding ring.
Yeah.
But it's just a reminder to follow what God has planned for you, and to be pure until marriage.
When we're talking about like being pure and purity, Megan, why don't you help us like define like what does that mean? Because I know that there's a lot of people who, like my generation especially, because you're just past that generation gap.
Yeah.
Like millennials, they tend to like have this issue where they've been given kind of like a, I don't know, they refer to purity culture like it's this
A
bad thing that happened, which I understand where that comes from because there were some legalistic things in there. So,
Yeah.
So why don't you help us define what like biblical purity looks like? What does it look like? Like what were the kinds of things that mom and dad taught us versus like just at large people, what they may have heard at a youth group or something.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, let me say that there is a difference between like purity and what that actually is, and the standards that you may set for yourself, because people may have certain different standards when it comes to a relationship or what they're going to allow in that relationship. So purity, generally talked about, is like strictly virginity. Like that's generally what people think when they hear the term. Purity biblically is a state of your heart, and it is a decision you make to be pure before God. So I think when people talk about purity culture like it's a bad thing, it's because people got too strict about all the don'ts, and they didn't tell them all the do's and all the good stuff. So it's not bad to remain pure until marriage. Let me start with that. And it is not something to be looked down upon. And if you have messed up and that's why you feel like purity culture is a terrible thing, it's not that you messed up too bad for God to help you. It's that some people don't understand that you can still be pure until marriage, even if you have messed up in the past. Because God can renew that for you. God can be with you, and you can change your heart and change your mind. So I think a lot of people just have a lot of misunderstandings, and they're like, they think it's a legal thing when really it's a decision that the right thing to do is to wait for the one person instead of giving yourself away over and over and over and over.
Yeah, definitely.
That's good. What are some, I don't know, Bible passages, books, resources, things that has helped each of us to like have a good biblical perspective on purity? What are some things you would suggest, like if a parent or an older like teenager were listening to the podcast, some things to get a hold of to help them?
I think the biggest like thing that had an impact on me, I guess, was the book that mom read us girls. What's it called? The
Princess and the Kiss?
Princess and the Kiss.
By Jenny Bishop.
It's a really, really good book, and to this day it's still like kind of like it sits in the back of my mind whenever I think of purity. That's like one of the first things I think of. It's just a really good explanation of why you save yourself and why you keep yourself pure and why you wait, because the reward is really, really good. And I think that book explains it very well and in a very relatable way, and in a story way that helps you to remember it.
Yeah, so let me real quick summarize that this book was about, it's written for girls ages like 7 through 13, and it is a book about this princess, and when she is born, she receives her very first gift, which is her first kiss. And so the kiss in this book represents your purity or your actual first kiss, which is kind of how we interpreted it, and we can talk about that in a minute. But going through this book, she treasures this. It is her favorite thing that she owns. And she doesn't let anyone just have it. She doesn't let anyone see it. She locks it away until the time is right. And even though a bunch of different princes come and they could be the one, they are not. And so she doesn't give it to any of them. She waits until the right one comes along and hands it to him. So it's a very good metaphor of treasuring yourself
Yeah.
and making sure that you cherish who you are and you aren't putting your worth in someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good one.
For me, the verse that comes to mind, I cannot remember passage, but it is to live an undefiled life, to present yourself a living sacrifice unto God. And that one kind of always stuck with me. And then the one on my ring actually has the passage of scripture from 1 Timothy. Yeah, 1 Timothy 4:6 through 1, and it's, man of God, pursue righteousness and keep the faith. And that's always been an encouragement to me that this is something God wants me to do, not because he hates me or anything, but because he has saved someone and something special for me. And I am supposed to wait. I'm supposed to pursue him until I get to that point, wherever it all comes together and I finally have the wife that I'm supposed to have.
Yeah. That's good. I would say a resource I would add would be the thing that probably impacted me the most was The Secret Keeper by Dana Gresh. I love anything by Dana. She's very good.
Also, Get Lost. It was so good. Mom made me read it for school, and I cried like 5 times the first chapter. It's a really, really, really good book for teenage girls. On pursuing God before you pursue a relationship. It's really good. I really enjoyed it. Like I would recommend that to pretty much anyone.
Get Lost.
Yeah.
You know who the author was?
Dana Gresh.
Dana Gresh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dana's great. Anything by her is really, really good. And then one that I've actually given to Abby and to our daughter is Girl Defined. Very good, because it talks about your identity in Christ, and I think that that's really important as we're talking through this topic.
Yeah, I think purity does come down to who you are and who you are in Christ, because once you know that, then you know, oh, then I'm just not going to go out and be with some rando just because. Some rando, because I'm like, you know what, I want this, and this is, no, you're going to wait, because you're like, no, I am worth more than just somebody that will fill the time before I get to that person.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I think that you have to treasure yourself and what God has created you to be before you can give that to someone. And it's not just something to give to anyone. It is something that is valuable and is worth a lot. And so you have to make sure that you know that you are valuable. And you do not have to give that to just anyone who walks up. You have to pray through it. You have to build your relationship with God, and you have to know in your heart and in your mind that you are worth it.
I think too that as a Christian, God chose. My husband and I were talking about this the other day. God chose family as the metaphor for how He relates to us. He chose marriage to represent Christ and the church. He chose father to represent how we see him. And so when we don't follow his plan for family and marriage, we distort the image of God to those around us. We aren't showing a proper view of God to those around us. And I think that is very important as a Christian to have a good understanding and grasp of God made this the metaphor that he used, and in following his plan I exemplify Christ to the world in a way that I can't otherwise. So I think that also is something to keep in mind, and something to instill in our kids, because kids aren't thinking about the church and Jesus are the marriage is the example of how they relate. They aren't thinking about that.
No.
So it's our kind of the job of the parent to be like, hey, by the way, you might want to think longer than the end of your nose. And look at how God has set this up, because it shows something particular. So that's a thought from my end.
And speaking of being a teenager and purity being very stressed at that point in time, I will say that living pure and keeping yourself set apart for God and for the person that you're going to marry, it's really hard some days. there are some days where you're just like, I'm lonely. I want a person to just be with me at this moment, and not my family, just someone.
Just someone else.
Someone else. I think because God built us to be paired off, we long for someone to be with us.
Yeah.
And it can be really hard, and you can have moments of doubt and wondering, am I supposed to do this? I could go out and get a girlfriend or boyfriend right now, and I think I'd be okay with that, but I think that it is the focus on what God has promised that brings it back to it. And also being able to talk to people about this, because I know for a while I didn't talk to people about purity stuff, and that kind of hurt me mentally that I didn't want to talk about that.
Sure.
But now that I have people that I talk with that about, it definitely gets a lot easier. It's also picking the right people to talk to about that. Because if you're talking to a guy who's had 5 girlfriends in the last week, maybe not the best person to be discussing, hey, I'm staying pure until marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's actually a lot harder for guys because girls talk about everything with each other. So we talk about the purity. We talk about the, well, there's this guy that I kind of like, and we talk about those things a lot. But guys, I think it's harder for them to open up about that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of harder for you to find someone of value to have that discussion with, and like not influence you in a bad way, but like build you up, brother and brother.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
I have no idea.
Okay, let's pause for a second then.
You want me to go check the camera?
Yeah, go ahead and go check it. And
Oh, you stopped it instead of...
so kind of going off of that, let's talk about for a minute like peer pressure and people's reaction to
Oh yes.
to your commitment to waiting for marriage. For me, it was not dating at all unless I was going to marry that person. I just never dated until I dated my husband. And so what are some interesting things that you've been told or heard, or like some ways that maybe someone who isn't a Christian or who maybe is more cultural would respond?
Okay. I know we all went to Bible school, TBI, great place, but down there not everyone is as solid a Christian as maybe you are or your family is, and so they all have different viewpoints on that. And I wouldn't say there was a lot of peer pressure to like lose your virginity or anything, but definitely a lot of peer pressure to date people that other people saw you two together and like, hey, you two are cute, you two should totally date. And you have to keep explaining to them, no, we're not dating, we're just friends. And I had a friend who was a girl, and people were like, oh, so you two are dating. And we had actually talked about, are we going to date or not? And we both prayed about it, and separately, that's a very important thing. Don't pray with your prospective partner, dater, that if you're going to date together, because hormones and things are just going to get in the way of that, of hearing the voice of God. And we prayed about it, and we both decided that we were going to just be friends, and that we weren't supposed to be together. And so for 4 months, we had to tell people, no, we're not dating, we're just friends.
Yeah, I remember that, because whenever we came to pick you up, even like us, we were all like is this Scott?
Yep. I even had, you all had went to like, gone somewhere, and it was just me, mom, dad, and like Matthew. And they asked me like, Scott, did you date that girl? Are you dating her? And I had to be like, no guys, no, we're just friends.
I think it's because we have decided that we're not going to date. We're going to wait for God to match us up with who we're supposed to be with. And that's really countercultural.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for people out in the culture to understand why we're not dating.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't have a lot of issue with like people questioning that too much whenever I was like in youth group and stuff.
Yeah.
But now that I'm like older, I have work and stuff, that people are like, oh, so like you like that person, you should just like date them. I was like, yeah, no, like you see, like until I'll explain to them like, so I'm waiting, and like I don't just date. Like that's just not something that I do. That's not how my family operates. And I've gotten several from people being like, well, you're an adult, so you can just do whatever. I'm like, well, the thing is, I also respect my parents, and I respect how they have taught me what to expect in a spouse and what to expect from the dating process, quote unquote. And so I don't want to just be rebellious and just date anyway. And I also have told many people that I don't want to date because I don't want it to just end in heartbreak. I want it to be something that lasts a lifetime, and just jumping into something that's, you're not going to every time. And there might be some cases where jumping into it worked out fine, but in a lot of cases that just leads to heartbreak.
Yeah.
And I don't want to break my own heart, and God doesn't want me to break my heart because He, spent a lot of time on that. Right. So, it's a resolve within yourself to do that.
I think also the older you get, the more people are like, well, you're gonna have to go out and date to find the one that's supposed to be for you. And I think that when you look at them and you're like, I don't date, I'm just waiting on God to bring them, they think you're a little crazy.
Yeah.
Like, because I don't think it computes that you could get together with someone without the whole dating game.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people also think it's crazy to wait on God to bring you someone, because like you always get the comment of like, well, that's just not how that works, and you're like, well, kind of is, but it's just a different perspective on relationships and how they work.
And to plug a very good resource for this, I Kissed Dating Goodbye is a book that all four of us read in high school. I cannot remember the author's name off the top.
Joshua Harris. Yes,
it is a very good book, and it talks about the pitfalls of dating, why you shouldn't date, and why you should wait for God for marriage and for finding that person. And it is a very good book, and I highly recommend it.
I'm also going to plug a resource here. Us and our book resources.
Yes.
I just finished reading this one actually, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
It is called What He Must Be to Marry My Daughter, and it's by Dr. Vodi Bakum.
Ah, I love Vodi Bakum.
Oh my gosh. And it's excellent, and it talks about kind of what you were saying, Abby, about how in a biblical perspective, it's not necessarily about just dating till you find the one. It is about the child and the parent working together to find a mate that is suitable according to the Bible.
Yeah.
Because there are standards set in the Bible of what that person must be in order for your child to marry them. And especially in a case like ours where our parents are Christians and we are all Christians. None of us are like over here rebelling, doing our own thing, just going off to find somebody. Especially in that case, well, then we would want to obey the biblical precedent. We would want to follow the part where we honor their thought and their process with us in that decision. So that just changes it, because it's not just go find whoever. And it's not that you can't look or can't ask the Lord, is this the one? It's just, and that you shouldn't pursue marriage. That is a thing. You shouldn't just say, well, I'm going to wait, but not be open or available or working on yourself. Because if you're just sitting, you're just a sitting duck. And you aren't working toward something, well, that doesn't make you a suitable mate either.
While we're talking about this, you are the only ones at the moment
to
have successfully done this. So why don't you take us through some of the process with you and Chris and how that all kind of happened?
I wasn't planning to get married right out of college. No, so it was an interesting process. I never dated in high school, never dated in college.
Mhm.
There were a couple guys in college that I liked, but they were not interested in me, and so I was like, whatever.
Fair.
And they all have wonderful, beautiful wives
Mhm.
now, and people that I know, and they're
Yeah.
great. And so I just never really dated, partly because I just was focused on other things.
Yeah.
I'm a very like get stuff done kind of person. And so my husband and I met at church. The church our dad was pastoring at the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
And basically my husband started bringing me coffee like fairly regularly to church in the mornings. And I didn't really like him at first, and I don't know if he I don't think there was a time where he didn't like me.
Yeah.
I just didn't like him. And being a man, he was the one who was pursuing, which is how it's supposed to work. And so he started bringing me coffee just as a friend, and I was still not interested. And then I don't know. There wasn't like a switch where it was like, oh, now I'm interested.
Mhm.
It was a process of being pursued, and then him talking to my dad to talk about having a conversation with me about being in a relationship. And so there was the process of he asked my dad if he could take me to dinner. We went to dinner. I had already prayed and really felt like he was the one prior to this.
Mhm.
And even at that point, I don't know that I was like in love with him. I just was very at peace with pursuing that relationship.
Mhm.
And so as we walked forward with that, we were never alone. We set up boundaries. We were never alone. We held hands. We sat next to each other. We
Mhm.
did not kiss until our wedding day. That was something that was important to me particularly, and he honored that. And we dated, I guess is the best term for it, for about 6 months.
Yep.
And then he proposed, and then we were engaged for 6 months, and then we were married. And so it was very quick because we knew going into it really
Mhm.
that was where we were headed. There were definitely points in the relationship where one of us could have backed out or said, oh, I don't think that
Mhm.
I'm okay with going forward here or whatever. He had a daughter prior to meeting me.
Yep.
And so that was kind of something that the Lord and I had to talk through. Like, do I feel capable of doing that? Is that something that I'm willing to do?
Mhm.
Because just because you start a relationship with someone doesn't mean that you absolutely have to marry them either. If I could have walked away had I
Mhm.
decided to, but I felt peace from the Lord that this was a good choice, that he was a godly man, and that, it was okay to keep going, that I could handle the situation we were in. With him having a daughter prior to us getting together.
Mhm.
So that was something that, it was a process, but it was probably for most people, they would say it was a quick process because we didn't
Yeah.
do the whole, you date and then you decide to move in,
Yeah.
and then a few years later you finally get a ring, and then a few
Mhm.
years later after you've planned and spent thousands of dollars you have a wedding, and
Yeah.
then we didn't do that
Yeah.
at all. So it's quick compared to some
Mhm.
people's
Yeah.
standards.
Yep.
How we did that.
I think
So,
also we should ask, was the waiting worth it?
yeah, absolutely. It absolutely was. And honestly, I was very prepared to wait longer than I did because like I said, I wasn't really planning on getting married when we got married.
Mhm.
I was going to pursue other things. I had other ideas of what I was going to be doing as far as career and such. But that, like, it kind of goes back to the point I was saying before. Like, I wasn't just being the sitting duck. I was
Mhm.
headed somewhere. I was going somewhere.
Yeah.
I was, somebody who was a good candidate because I had my own things I was headed
Mhm.
toward. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't just like, here I am. I'm so wonderful,
Right.
Because some people do that. They're like, well, I don't know why anybody doesn't want me, and you're kind of like, maybe you should work on some stuff. Like I was actively working on me and headed somewhere. So yeah, it was worth it, and I was well prepared to wait even longer had he not come at that time. So I think that it's probably one of the best decisions that one can make, just because it avoids a whole lot of things you can fall into, a whole lot of pitfalls.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't
Mhm.
necessarily want to start naming them all, but you know. Yeah. Scott, I do have a question for you that I
Oh.
thought of while we were sitting here.
Okay.
Because we're all girls,
Yes,
Yes.
and there's only two genders,
there are,
and
but that's a topic.
that's
for
a whole topic for another time.
podcast.
Yeah. So you're the only male sitting here.
Yes.
You're the only one who can be a boy sitting here.
Yes.
And you know about being a dude, and we don't.
Yes.
So my question for you is, what would you say is different or harder, or how do you balance being the one who has to pursue? Because like for girls, I feel like we can do a lot more sitting.
Mhm.
Like there's a
Oh,
lot,
yes.
like we can,
Yeah.
like we still are working on ourselves, but there's a
Mhm.
lot more sitting involved.
Yeah.
And I feel like for a guy, there's a lot more things that you probably deal
Mhm.
with, like figuring out when to pursue and how to pursue, and like,
Yes.
is this the one to pursue? Like, so
So-
talk to that for a minute.
So, as a guy, I can say that finding someone to even talk to is hard because we don't want to look like we're creepy, and whenever we come to talk to someone, we don't want to be the guy with the slick back hair and the mustache and be like, "Hey, how you doing?" Because that only works in really bad soap operas.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so it's guys are more, I don't know if this is true, but it feels like we see someone and we're like, oh wow, I think she's pretty, and we do that more often, I feel
Uh-huh.
like, than girls who were like, wow, she's
Yeah.
pretty, she's out of my league, I can't go up and talk to her. And so it's finding someone like that, but then it's also situational. Like if I see someone in a grocery store, I'm like, I don't know anything about her, I can't just go up and talk to her.
Yeah.
If I'm at church, I'm like, but we're just friends. I don't want to pursue a relationship with this
Uh-huh.
person. Or a lot of times it's because we have such, the family has such the standard that we don't date. And other people don't have that standard. A lot of times people have boyfriends already. And so you're like, oh, at least for me, I'm like, I can't pursue that relationship because
Sure, yeah.
she's already
Ready.
got
Uh-huh.
somebody, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be the homewrecker in,
Right.
in that situation.
Right.
And so it is a lot of waiting and looking for the right time, and sometimes the right time just never comes. And so the family my sisters kind of joke that someone's gonna have to come up to me and tell me that they like
Yeah.
me before anything happens, and I'm trying to get over that and trying to be more assertive and be like, hey, I like you, but at the same time, I haven't found anybody
Sure.
that I want
Yeah.
to pursue a relationship with,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I have standards, I have things that I want, and the Bible talks in Proverbs 31 about what a godly woman is supposed to be,
Mhm.
and with that standard in mind, being something that I'm not trying to go below, but something I'm trying to live up to, it's very hard to find someone that
Mhm.
you actually could see yourself dating in our more biblical sense and eventually marrying.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of fear involved in being a guy whenever it comes to dating, because like you have, if you're the pursuer, you have to go up and ask the question, hey,
Right.
do you want to go out with me? You want to
Yeah.
get a coffee or
Yeah.
whatever your line
And if you're
is.
not talking to her, you're talking to her dad.
Yes.
Right.
And that is a thing that I'm very old school. I watch a lot of old movies, and
Yeah.
I'm very romantic at heart. And so I want, and you kind of have to wonder like what the relationship is with the father. If you should even ask the father.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people have come from broken homes. They
Right.
come from bad fathers, bad moms. And so you want to ask for permission to date them, but also you want to get the permission from them first. Maybe be like, hey, you want to go out on a date with me? And if they say yes, then maybe kind of find out what your next step is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions that you had for
I think
me.
I have one follow up to
Mhm.
that. Would you say, just for my own curiosity,
Yeah.
would you say that it's harder in the
Mhm.
current zeitgeist of our
Yeah.
of our culture in our nation to find someone who is not like has feminism made it harder to find somebody? You know what I mean by that? Like
Mhm.
has
No,
it
like-
it gotten harder to find someone who's interested in the kinds of things you're interested in because it's, all woman power and I can do it on my own and that
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that it is, and I know a lot of strong, independent women, but we are friends. I don't want to date. I don't
Yeah.
want to date them, and a lot of times it does come off as, oh, if you do this, then you're anti-feminism. You're a misogynist. If you want to pay for stuff, then you're a misogynist. But at the same time, I've heard of people who, that's why they're in a relationship, because they want someone to pay for all their
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And they want the benefits of being in a relationship without giving what would
Yeah.
be in a relationship.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
want the guy to do everything traditionally, but then whenever it comes to them being a partner or
Yeah.
dating them and doing things
Yeah.
for them,
Yeah.
it's like, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm a strong, independent woman and I don't have to do that.
Like,
Yeah.
I have not come across this personally. This is just things I've heard from friends at
Sure,
work and
yeah.
things I've seen online, and
Yeah.
people talk about that. But I definitely feel like with feminism, it does become harder to find a partner.
Yeah.
you heard it here, folks. Okay, so to wrap up, I think we should mention that Scott and Megan and Abby are all currently on the market.
Oh my gosh.
We are.
Every time, Hannah.
So my children would like some cousins. So if you're listening to this and you're going and you're saying, "Hey, those people sound great," feel free to reach out and contact. Pray over it first, but
Wow. Hannah.
yeah, because
Yeah.
you never know. The
Match-
internet is very fast.
Matchmaking with Hannah over here.
And
And on that note,
and
thank
just
you for listening.
and just one more thing before we clarify, my sisters are very attractive, and so
Our brother's pretty good looking too.
that's not the point, right? So any prospective guys, you're going to have to go through me to get to them first.
And
Because,
Dad.
And Dad. There's a couple layers of security to get to them, but it is worth it because they are great people.
No.
All right, there you go.
And to wrap up, thank you for listening today. We hope that you got something out of this. We hope that we said something useful to you. Remember to like and subscribe wherever you are listening or watching this. And we will see you next time on the Unbreakable Podcast.
Okay.
Oh, everyone slouch.